Distinguished Chief Guest Sri Amitabh Kant, IAS Sherpa G20 Summit, distinguished Excellencies and diplomats from the G20 countries, dignitaries from the Government of India, ONDC, industry captains, our President Sri Saket Dalmia, Senior Vice President Sri Sanjeev Agarwal, Vice President Sri Hemant Jain, distinguished former presidents of the PhD Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Managing Committee members, ladies and gentlemen and friends from the media. We are really honored to have amongst us Sri Amitabh Kant, IAS, and Sherpa G20, who will address and interact with us in a short while on the 18th G20 Leadership Summit. We are also pleased to receive members, chairs and co-chairs of the PhD Chamber from the states who have travelled all the way from the states of Jammu and Kashmir, Rajasthan, Bihar, Chhattisgarh, Madhya Pradesh, Uttar Pradesh, Northeastern region and Delhi and NCR to attend this interaction. We had the privilege of interacting with Mr. Amitabh Kantji in the past on numerous occasions when he was the Secretary DPIIT and CEO of the coveted Niti Aayog several times. As the Sherpa of G20, it's once again our privilege that he will be interacting with us, and he has agreed to address our members and dignitaries on what role India is going to play as the leader of the summit and the opportunities that exist for our industry members. Ladies and gentlemen, during the daunting pandemic, we were fighting to save our people and our economic activities. We were also trying hard to maintain a balance and face the vagaries of the climate change, where we were very successful, and the world knows that we have done extremely well under our dynamic leader led by the Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi ji. Without further ado, I would now like to request all present here to applaud the Honorable Prime Minister and the Sherpa G20 for having positioned India as the leader of the prestigious 18th G20 Summit, which India truly deserves. Thank you and Jai Hind.
Welcome everybody. Shri Amitabh Kantji, G20 India Sherpa. Shri Sanjeev Agarwal ji, our Senior Vice President of the PhD CCI. Shri Hemant Jain ji, our Vice President PhD CCI. Your Excellencies, Ambassadors, High Commissioners, so nice to see so many of them here present. Former Presidents, Senior Management Committee members and members, friends of the industry and media, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me great pleasure to welcome Shri Amitabh Kantji, G20 India Sherpa, to this special interactive session with the PhD Chamber. With India taking over the presidency in less than a month from now, and with the release of the concept by our Honorable Prime Minister not even an hour ago, you can imagine how extremely busy this time has been for Sir, and we greatly appreciate his address to us today. At the onset, I must thank our star member, Mr. Shahrukh Pasi, who has been chair of PhD CCI Task Force for G20 to make it possible for us to squeeze into Sir's busy schedule to make this evening possible. Thank you, Shahrukh. Before we continue, I think it's worth sharing. I would like to present the official logo of India's G20 presidency that has been just launched by our Honorable Prime Minister. Then we have, it's worth mentioning that he just announced the theme of the presidency, which is One Earth, One Family, One Future, or Vasudev Kutumbakam. Dear Sir, when I went to invite you personally, I must admit that I was totally floored. It was you who guided me that G20 was in fact an opportunity for India, and we are one of its key enablers and beneficiaries. As you know, Amitabh Kantji needs no introduction. His career as a bureaucrat spanning over 4 decades has established him as a thought leader and the man with the Midas touch. His every initiative has been a resounding success, and has won many international and national awards and accolades. It is no surprise that our Honorable Prime Minister has appointed him as the G20 Indian Sherpa. We wish you the very best in your mission, sir. And I would like to recall, as candidly as our SG said, that Sir has been connected with the Chamber since 2015, when he was a secretary at Department of National Policy and Promotion. And he had much appreciated our paper on ease of doing business and pricing on medical devices. And we have been lucky to have him at our support and his encouragement since then.
Minutes back, about half an hour back, launched the logo, the theme, and our website for the G20. And actually, this is the first event where any official of G20 is speaking. So, first chamber where we are speaking. India will take over the presidency of G20 from 1st of December. It's important to understand as to why G20 is so significant and so important. G20 comprises of both the developed world, that is the G7 of the world, and many emerging markets of the world. It comprises of about 85% of the global GDP. It comprises about 75% of the global trade. It comprises of 90% of the patents, and it comprises of about 2/3 of the global population. G20 is important because in the past, whenever there's been a global crisis or a global financial crisis or a COVID crisis or a crisis of global debt, G20 decisions have led to very fast, very quick, and very major decisions being taken by different countries, leading to a resolution of those crises in the past. The 2008 financial crisis, or the establishment of the Financial Stability Board, or the debt, the DSSI, the Debt Sustainability Board initiative, all these were G20 initiatives. G20 is important because it's not a large body, large unwieldy body or comprising of 186 nations like the United Nations, which becomes very difficult to arrive at decisions. It's not like G7, which is very, very elitist. The G20 is therefore the right blend of both developing and the developed world. The history of G20 can be traced back to 1999, when the G7 expanded to become a G20 of finance minister and of central bank governors. It used to then cover just the finance track. In 2008, President Bush actually realized that the 2008 financial crisis, there was a Mexico peso crisis, there was a Russian financial crisis. Many of these crises could not be solved by just at the level of central bank governors. They required a leadership of a different level, and therefore he got in touch with the leaders of the many countries, and he said it's important to involve many of these emerging markets into them, because several crises were emerging from the emerging markets. Also, it was realized that actually the GDP of the emerging markets was growing and expanding much quicker, much faster, and the GDP of the developing world, the developed world was actually coming down. So you had a scenario where the emerging markets were growing faster and the developed world was remaining stagnant. So 20 countries got together in Washington, later at Pittsburgh, and that's how the G20 became a very active and a very important and a critical body, and today in the world it is the most important body. The G20 has, for the first time, the leadership of the G20 has been taken over by a developing nation, which is Indonesia. From Indonesia, it moves to India, and actually later it will go to Brazil and then to South Africa. So emerging markets will now play a very major role in the G20 presidency. By the time we take over the presidency of G20, the world will be confronted with several challenges. We must realize that by the time we take over, there will be a slowing down of the global economies, and in many parts of the world there will be recession, and therefore this will be a challenge to the world. Secondly, there's a major crisis of a debt, global debt in most countries. Almost 70 countries of the world are impacted by global debt. Their debt is just too big. They're not able to service their debt. As you've seen in Sri Lanka, there will be crisis in another country or a third country, and then there'll be a spiraling effect of this crisis in several other parts of the country. So there is a global debt crisis. We've not yet fully recovered from the post-COVID pandemic, which has impacted very vast segments of the population. Almost about 200 million people have gone below poverty line. Almost 75 million people have been impacted worldwide, and almost about 120 million people have got impacted due to lack of education during this period. So there's been a huge impact in the post-COVID era of people not being able to, the post-COVID pandemic has really, instead of progressing on the sustainable development goals, the world has regressed, not progressed. And therefore, there's a challenge of development across the world. The fourth key challenge for the world is that, the climate, if you have to, one of the biggest crises right now is the crisis of climate change. The world is confronted with this crisis that you have to, several studies have already raised the red flag that if you are not able to reach 1.5 degrees centigrade by 2050, the world will be severely impacted. Several countries will go below water levels, huge impacts in terms of weather conditions, and therefore the world has to reach the 1.5 degree. While India has not contributed to carbonizing the world, we've occupied very little carbon space, but we feel that it's very important that this climate action, climate mitigation, the Prime Minister is committed to a very major Panch Amrit at the Glasgow, where he said that India views this not as a challenge but as a huge opportunity to technologically leapfrog and be a leader of climate action. And therefore, the fourth big crisis confronting the world is the crisis of climate action. And lastly, I must say that there's a huge crisis of breakdown of global supply chains across the world. You're seeing a scenario where Europe was largely dependent on energy from Russia, is not able to get energy. Energy prices have gone up substantially. Global supply chains, which was restricted to one part of the world, have got hugely disrupted. That is the key challenge. Ancient civilization. An ancient civilization has always aimed to bring countries, communities, social groups, and individuals face to face with one another. It has always fostered very close relationship because our belief always has been that there is unity in diversity. And the unity in diversity is across people, it is across countries, the unity of diversity is across philosophic thoughts, and it is across all countries and people that there has to be unity and diversity of people. So our view has been that you have to have unity amidst all diversity. And there is the unity in the diversity of man, unity in the diversity of nature, unity in the diversity of philosophic thoughts, and unity in the diversity of different economic models. So once we understand that we are all parts of a single cosmic web, that there is one single cosmic web from which every country, every single citizen, everybody is emerging. We are nothing but actually all human souls are then part of one single cosmic web. And therefore, tensions and conflict among nations and countries should abate, they should get resolved, and they should ultimately disappear. That is basically the essence of what we are trying to say through the logo and theme. And I think it has a very deep philosophic thought. It has an ancient Indian feel to it. It is civilizational in nature. India goes beyond the immediate realm to its ancient civilization, and it's looking at the larger cosmos of the world to design this logo and this theme, and looks beyond just saying that, looking at the immediate goals. But this is really the key. But as we look at this, it's very important to understand that the world is confronted with a challenge. The world is confronted with a challenge, and if you need to actually get people above poverty line, if you need to get people to acceleration of growth will be very critical. And therefore, countries will have to work together to accelerate growth. Countries will have to work together to restore global supplies and the global distribution supplies. Global supplies will have to be distributed much equitably across the world. There is a huge challenge, as I said, about SDG goals. Very vast segments of population have gone below poverty line, and therefore SDGs will be critical. So in our view, one of the key things in building up an Indian narrative has been that digital transformation will be the key. India has demonstrated that it has built up an alternative model of digital public infrastructure. We've built up a digital identity for every individual. We've been able to build data empowerment for citizens. We've been able to provide mobiles to every citizen. We've been able to provide direct benefit transfers to vast number of people. So during COVID, we were able to provide 800 million Indians direct food, 600 schemes of the government. We transfer money directly into the bank accounts of the individual. We as a country do fast payments, and today our fast payments are 7x of what USA and Europe do together. We do about 3x of what China does. We do 20% more than USA, Europe and China together. So we've established a unique digital platform which is based on the JAM Trinity. We've established CoWIN, we've done FASTags, we've done Ayushman Bharat, where we PM Jan Arogya Yojana, where we provided health insurance to 500 million Indians, which is totally cashless, paperless and digital. So most digital technological evolutions have come from the developed part of the world. But what India has demonstrated is that we've been able to ensure privacy of data and innovation both at the same time through the Indian model of digital public infrastructure. Unlike the big tech model of the USA or unlike the GDPR model of Europe, which worked on privacy but actually did not ensure adequate innovation. In India, the public track is owned by public entities, but we've allowed private sector to innovate. So we're the only country where Google Pay actually competes with PhonePe, Paytm competes with WhatsApp in the marketplace, but on top of the public track, which is the unified payment interface. And that is why we believe that this is the model for the future. This will be the model which will drive digital transformation, not merely in terms of payments, but across education, across health, across agriculture productivity. This model of what India established and done a massive amount of digital transformation in India will really be the key to development across the world.